Hello and a very warm welcome indeed to Quadriga, where the focus this week is on Spain, which is facing its gravest political crisis in decades. Separatists in the Catalonia region in the northeast of the country have stepped up their push for independence from Madrid, but the central government has firmly rejected the separatist drive, and a large number of Catalans have themselves also made it clear that they want to remain part of Spain. In a key development, the head of the Catalan Government has suspended a declaration of independence, saying there is still time to talk. So our question on Quadriga this week, Barcelona against Madrid, will Spain break up? And to discuss that question, I'm joined here in the studio by Gabriel Gonzales Zorilla from DW's Spanish desk, who says Catalonia should stay a part of Spain, but the rigid approach adopted by Prime Minister Rajoy is only strengthening the Catalan independence movement. Also with us is Malte Leeming from the Berlin daily The Tagesspiegel. He too argues that Catalonia must remain part of Spain, but only if negotiations lead to very far-reaching autonomy. And a warm welcome also to Marie Kapretz, who is Berlin-born, but says she feels like a Catalan, and is indeed the head of the delegation of the Catalan government here in Germany. She believes that the situation in Catalonia and Spain requires international mediation. Well, Marie Kapretz, at this point in time, the only thing we really know for certain about what's happening in Spain is that the bitter standoff between Madrid and Barcelona continues. What can you tell us about how determined the separatists in Catalonia remain to push for full independence from Spain?
Well, we have to look at the recent 7 years where the independence movement got stronger and stronger, and we had about a million protesters every year in favor of independence, and we had then finally a demonstration in favor of remaining last Sunday, which was about 350,000 participants. So, but in fact, we need reasonable numbers, so that's what
you're giving me a lot of numbers, but give me an answer to the question. Are the separatists still determined to push for full independence from Spain? No doubt about it whatsoever?
No doubt about it.
OK, just to confirm that, before we continue, before we bring in the other two guests, let's have a look at what Carles Puigdemont had to say earlier this week.
The government and I propose that Parliament suspend the implementation of the Declaration of Independence, so that in the coming weeks we can begin a dialogue. Without dialogue, it will be impossible to achieve a solution. We ask not only for a de-escalation of tensions, but also a clear commitment and a will to make progress on the demands of the people of Catalonia, based on the results of the October 1st referendum.
Marie Kapretz, back to you. What we have seen is that Carles Puigdemont and other Catalan leaders have signed this Declaration of Independence. It's going to be enacted at some time in the near future. When precisely?
Well, as Carles Puigdemont said, there is space for negotiations, and we are waiting for a clear signal from Madrid that they are willing to...
Madrid doesn't want negotiations. Madrid doesn't want to talk.
I think we are talking about a time lapse about a month or something. We should wait for a clear signal if it doesn't arrive, but it could arrive because there are international pressures on Madrid as well.
OK, let's bring Malte Leeming in from the Berlin Tagesspiegel. Malte, a lot of people are saying Spain is teetering on the brink. It's very tense, clearly, lots of uncertainty. If Spain is teetering on the brink of what?
Oh, that is a very good question. I mean, the brink of more tensions. Because, I mean, the first speech of the Catalan leader was like intentional ambiguity. Let's go to war,
ambiguity.
But yes, ambiguity. Let's go to war, but let the weapons stay on the ground. So, so it led to the fact that Rajoy didn't know what to make out of it. So he asked for a clear message. Please give me a more clear message. I would suspect they won't give him, because that's what he wanted and asked for. So the whole tension escalating dynamic is still going on with no clear end in sight.
Why didn't he declare independence there and then? It almost seemed like...
Then there's no more room for leverage. I mean, he wanted to bring Rajoy into the position to declare himself, if there is more room for negotiations or not. If he would have declared independence, I would suspect that the tanks would have rolled.
Gabriel, what do you say? A lot of Spanish journalists in recent weeks have been talking about two trains about to collide with each other. Has the collision taken place, or is it still going to happen?
Not yet, but we're very, very close. I think they are both moving a little bit, but really tiny, tiny, tiny. They are both under big pressure inside of Spain with their own people, like the nationalists, the separatists were very disappointed also with Puigdemont, surely. And there's also the pressure on Rajoy by his own party base. And there's the international pressure. We don't know much, but we know that there are people in the European community pressuring on both sides, that they should move. And I hope really that...
Maybe I can add a short anecdote, because there's a cartoon saying the famous phrase, "There's light at the end of the tunnel." And the answer is, yeah, that's not a train.
Okay.
Why do you think Mr. Puigdemont did, at the last moment, pull back? He almost seemed it was his moment of destiny, and he suddenly pulled the handbrake. What was the reason for that? Really because he believes in talks?
Maybe she could tell us. Because I suppose that the pressure got too much. I mean, the industry leaving, maybe, you know, some banks moving and switching to other cities, pressure from outside, the feeling that if he really pulls his card, he doesn't have any card anymore. Yeah. I mean, the next step would be the police coming up and locking him up. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people on the extreme base side of Rajoy who are like screaming, lock him up, lock him up. It sounds like lock her up, like in the US, no? Lock him up.
When you mentioned Prime Minister Rajoy, you have written about in the last week or so about the total failure of Spain's political class. If mistakes have been made, who has made the biggest mistakes? The separatists or the centrists?
Oh, no, please, I won't answer this question. I mean, what is happening in Barcelona, sorry to say, it's illegal. That's for sure. And Rajoy is right in that. On the other hand, like hiding behind the constitution the whole time is not good policy. That's also what I wrote. This is not a good policy. He is lacking of empathy, totally, Rajoy. I mean, he was unable to talk to the Catalans during years, and he should have, since 2010. He had 7 years to talk with them. He didn't do this. And now this escalated and came to this point. And this is, horrible.
Marie Kapretz, a lot of commentators have questioned the legitimacy of the independence drive, even in terms of international law. How do you explain your case for legitimacy, for separatism?
No, it's completely legitimate, because we have this forward push from the grassroots, so people are pushing forward. It's not the government. Media say that a lot, but it's not true. So it's not the government that's leading the independence movement. It's people pushing from
but there are people pushing in the other direction too. There are Catalans pushing in the other direction too.
Yes, but that's why we wanted to have the referendum, which was in our terms legal, because we believe that there is space for a referendum in the constitution, but the way the Madrid government is interpreting the constitution is always against the Catalan interests. So, but we see a clear gap for that referendum. So the referendum was the peaceful and democratic way to check back and say, okay, we have every year we have this big, huge manifestations on the street.
These demonstrations.
How can we check whether this is real or not? Are they very loud or are they majority? So the democratic way was to hold a referendum and to see how many voters are for no or for the yes.
I think the most important question is on what level of legality are we discussing the problem? If we are discussing it on the national level, I think most lawyers agree that a separation would be against the Constitution of Spain. Even though there might be some other, but that's always the case with lawyers, but most, I think, agree it is against the Constitution of Spain. If we talk about international law, it looks different. International law, self-determination of a single group, this is a value that is kept high. Nation borders is a value that is kept high. There is no clear answer on international law.
We're talking about the self-determination of a certain group of people who feel as though they are under the yoke of a colonial power.
Yeah. which is not the case in colonial power because Spain is a democratic state. We could have made this argument in the Balkans, for example, when we talk about Croatia, Kosovo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, all these. There was Yugoslavia as a dictator, colonial power, if you want to call it, all the ex-Soviet Union states. This is not the case with Spain because it's a democratic state that should be solve the problem on democratic means.
Yeah, well, a referendum there's nothing more democratic than a referendum. And then,
yeah. Referendum where 42% participated.
Yeah, but it's very perverted. You need a certain chutzpah to say people didn't participate when you put bullets on and put police force in front of the polling station. So I think if you ask the Catalans, they don't really feel that there's a fair play within Spain, and that's what it's all about. So the legitimacy is rooting in that sense.
Gabriel is dying to get in.
Sorry. I mean, it looks like 80% of the Catalans would like to have a legal referendum. Yeah, that's totally okay. And I also think that this should be somehow acknowledged by Madrid. But this means right now, at this moment, the constitution doesn't give this possibility, unfortunately. And it should be changed. And it looks like yesterday, and I really hope, it looks like yesterday, Rajoy finally said something like, yeah, well, we will have to look at the constitution. Maybe now, something. And I hope that this starts a process of looking to the constitution, seeing what is good, what is bad, and what should be changed. Spain still has a big problem in the relationship between the center and the peripherics. Oh, they call it like this.
The periphery.
They call it like that, yeah.
Exactly. Still has a big unresolved problem, and they have to deal with it now.
But you have the right of a people for self-determination, but you have the right for people to stay in as a nation state with secure borders as well and stability. So why not have a referendum on Spain level? The outcome would be completely different, but they are claiming their own rights to live in a country with secure borders, with no exclusive rights for a single people to depart from it.
OK, let's move on from the question of constitutional legitimacy to the question of the economy. Catalonia is the wealthiest region in Spain, but there are signs that affluence could be put at risk by Catalan autonomy. Banks and other businesses are already planning to move their headquarters to other parts of Spain, as we see now.
The uncertainty has prompted a number of businesses to think about whether they want to stay in Catalonia. Several large banks have already announced that they're leaving. Businesses do not like uncertainty.
Business owners don't know whether Catalonia is going to stay in Spain, so they're reassessing their future. We'll always choose the safest option.
Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy has made it easier for businesses to change the location of their headquarters. All this will complicate Catalonia's move toward independence. Will it force the separatists to soften their demands?
That's the question, Marie Kapretz. Is the exodus of banks and businesses going to force the Catalonians to think twice about their drive for independence?
Well, these are political weapons as well, because there's this, as we heard, the decree of the state to make it easier for businesses to put their headquarters in another place.
But they're doing it. They're doing it. They're choosing to do it. Yeah?
Bank Sabadell did it. Others are talking about it. They didn't do it. So what we are looking at is the big numbers in the last years are very favorable towards Catalonia. We have big investment, international investment. It's growing, also growing in 2017. And we have this independence movement from 2010. So we don't really see that the independence movement is affecting the international investment in Catalonia. What is, of course, clear is that the private businessmen are free to move their business wherever they want. We think that Barcelona is a very attractive place to be, and I think we are not going to see bigger movements in that sense.
Gabriel, do you buy into this?
I'm not so optimistic. I think maybe there's a similar situation like during the Brexit or just before the Brexit. I mean, everything is going to be great and fine or whatever. And now everyone wakes up and oh, God, there are a lot of problems and maybe it's not everything fine. I mean, Catalonia will not be a member of the EU like after 2 or 3 days like this. Oh, no problem, they will take us, come on, it's no problem. Whereas a currency, these problems, there are a lot of problems that are not resolved. I mean, and people who pledge for independence usually, or separation, like from the EU, they tend to tell the people, hey, don't worry, everything will be fine and much better. And then you get into a situation that is even worse. Who knows?
Well, I'm talking about statistics, that's why, because it's not a feeling or an impression, but it's numbers.
Yeah, but forgive me if when I was sort of reading up on latest developments in Catalonia and Spain, I read that that dozens of companies have moved part of their operations or their whole operations away from Catalonia in the last year or so. I read one figure: more than 100 companies have exited. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you compare it to other regions, autonomous regions in Spain, it's more or less the same thing. It's not only in Catalonia.
I think what business is most afraid of is insecurity. And if the future, the political and legal structure and the future of Catalonia is in doubt, that's what business hates. So what they are fleeing is insecurity. It's not a status they have right now. The insecurity is due to the fact that from the perspective of the European Union, it would not be a very welcome affair, that the separation of it, because in all nation states in Europe, you have wealthy regions which pay more, and you have poor regions which they get subsidized by other people. So if the tendency that wealthy regions try to separate themselves from other parts of the country continues, that would be very much against everything European Union is based on.
Yes, but Catalonia right now is paying more to the European Union than it gets from it, and everybody is fine with that. Everybody wants to be in the EU because everybody understands that it's a good thing to do. So, on the other hand, it's very surprising that the EU has no look at the citizens, because Catalans are convinced European citizens, and what I fear more about is that there could be Euroscepticism being growing in the future when we see certain attitudes from the EU, because we saw frightening things on the 1st of October, and the EU was very, how would you say, well, it was days
silent,
afterwards, silent in front of that, yes.
It's been very quiet, the EU, generally speaking, on this story.
I wonder, what did you expect? The EU is a alliance of nations that obviously they are there to secure the integrity, they protect the integrity of the members.
States.
The international law actually is done by national states and that want to prevent the
breakup of
the breakup. Yeah, exactly. New states forming. Nobody has an interest in that. I mean, agree, it's not always fair, surely. Yeah, because surely not always fair. Because most states were drawn like on maps like this anywhere, like in past centuries. I mean,
and we had wars on it, and
it's not fair, surely, but nobody has an interest, and this is a fact. What to do?
OK, while you're talking about the regions of Spain, Spain has 17 regions with very varying degrees of autonomy. If one goes, perhaps others will want to follow, like, for instance, the Basque country, which is still scarred by a long and bloody struggle for independence from Madrid.
Will Catalonia remain peaceful? The Basque people in northern Spain are keeping a close eye on the situation, but only a minority in the Basque community are demanding independence.
Whatever happens in Catalonia, it'll be good for us. We're headed in the same direction. We've got to do something.
In any case, Basques do not want to return to the violence that tore the region apart in the late 1970s.
It could happen here like it did in Catalonia. But it could also be worse, more radical, like it used to be. I just don't know. I'm not worried. Just the opposite, in fact. People just want to stand up for themselves and win their freedom.
Catalonia could set an example for similar regions. Will they send a message to other independence movements in Europe?
Well, before we go to Europe, so let's stay in Spain, because you were talking about the architecture of the Spanish state. How fragile is that architecture?
The Constitution of '78 is not ready yet. It has to be reformed, clearly. We have 17 regions, yes, and at the very beginning, only a few of them were supposed to get autonomous status. Mm-hmm. Then, very quickly, it came out that everyone wanted to have one. Mm-hmm. Like every region wanted to have an autonomous status. This was called in Spain, I think, café para todos. This was coffee for everyone. Like the waiter comes to the restaurant and says, are you ready?
And the problem is that each of these autonomous regions wants more coffee each time the merry-go-round goes round. Yeah.
The problem is that every status has to be negotiated with Madrid differently. So everyone got a different cup of coffee. Mm. Yeah, one bigger, the other one got a little, wanted more
But
sugar.
always more.
Huh?
More each time. More autonomy each time, more privileges each time.
Sure, this too. When the Catalans came then in 2005, more or less, when they wanted a new one, they had reason to ask for it, obviously. Spain was a member now of the European community, so there were things to be discussed. Like, what is the role of Madrid, Barcelona, EU, who gets what right and everything. Is this totally okay that you have to negotiate again? But the system of everyone has to negotiate single is not very good. And the Basque, for example, the province, the País Vasco and the province of Navarra, they have special rights that the Catalans asked for. So like, okay, they can they have their own tax, budget, rights. We want this too. And so you have to talk about it, because if you have some people who have some rights and the others not, obviously the other one will ask and say like, hey, that's not fair, no? So Madrid has to work on that.
I think it always depends on the circumstances. I mean, from the perspective of the European Union, it's not separation as such, which is a bad thing, but the circumstances. I mean, for example, we had the Czechs and Slovaks. They were splitting, but in total agreement, and that was okay. Mm-hmm. We had a former Yugoslavia, a dictatorship, which kept all these little states, where we now Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, even Kosovo, under it, and didn't give them a certain kind of autonomy. But with Spain, it's quite different, because, for example, Catalonia has a huge degree of autonomy, which is not unprecedented in the whole world, but it's very, very large.
No, but the point you said about the other presidencies, this is what Catalonia wanted, to agree on a point, let's say as the smallest point, like let's do a referendum and see how many are in favor, how many are against the independence. But there's no way to convince Madrid to sit on the table and negotiate, and that's the problem. And that's not only in this moment, but also when we were negotiating the Statutes of Autonomy, when everything began, let's say, because of this non-negotiating acting and the attitude of Madrid, because we did a lot of proposals, but as Madrid always says, this is forbidden, this doesn't fit into the constitution, which is very questionable and a lot of times. But there was no, and on the other hand, there was no political offer for the Catalans. The Catalans lost completely their perspective within Spain.
Yes, but from the tactical questions, we're talking about separation, but what we really want is more autonomy. It has become its own dynamic. We're talking about separation, and we want separation. So this is now where at least a huge part of the Catalonians stand. This is the problem with the dynamic.
Spain is still a centralistic state.
Yes.
Yeah. As a centralistic state, it's quite decentralized in a way, but it's far away from being a federate state like Germany. Yeah? Like, for example, the representation of the provinces in the Senate. The Senate is there, exists, but you cannot compare it with the German Bundesrat.
Not at all.
Not at all, not at all. So as a centralistic state, it's decentralized with all this autonomous rights, but very uneven, and this has to be cleaned up.
And it always depends, if I may add to your point, it always depends to your good relations to Madrid whether you get more rights or not. Yeah. And it happened, then Catalonia claimed certain rights within the Statute of Autonomy, which were declared unconstitutional. But Extremadura has these rights, so it's like really questionable where is the line of inconstitutionality and not.
Yes.
OK, we've got 1 minute to go. I want a quick answer from each of you. Is Spain, in the foreseeable future, going to break up, yes or no?
I don't think so, because I think there still is room for negotiations below the level of separation.
Marie?
I hope that there's negotiations.
OK. Gabriel?
I hope there are negotiations, and we are all still can be proud of all the diverse countries within Spain.
OK. Thanks very much, all three of you, for being here today. On Quadriga, we've been talking about Spain, Madrid against Barcelona. I hope we've given you plenty of food for thought. Come back next week. Tschüss.